I don't know exactly which year, which months these significant changes in our workforce are going to happen, but I know it is coming very fast. I cannot change this societal change. Now, I could not embrace this change, and that would be fatal to the organization. And that would mean everybody will eventually be out of the job if I don't embrace technological change that makes the company better, makes the service better for people.
Welcome to Corporate Competitor, presented by Forbes Books, the podcast where executives share how the lessons they learned playing sports shaped their leadership. With me for today's episode is Glenn Fogel, CEO of Booking Holdings, the parent company of travel and dining brands you likely know, including Booking.com, KAYAK, and OpenTable. Glenn joined the company in 2000 as Vice President of Corporate Development and worked his way up over 17 years to lead one of the world's largest online travel platforms. Glenn grew up skiing and playing tennis, and he'll tell you in this episode that staying disciplined, consistent, and prepared has been just as important to his health as it has been to his leadership. Now make sure to check out corporatecompetitorpodcast.com/notes for my favorite quotes and reflection questions to help you apply today's insights. Glenn, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
You know, I'm so fascinated by your story and have studied a lot of it to be prepared for today. And I love the way, again, I'm a sports guy at heart, but I love leadership. And you compare leadership to coaching. You had a great quote: a CEO is not the one taking the game-winning shot, but rather a CEO's job is to create the environment where your players can thrive. I love that metaphor. And like you said, we never saw Nick Saban or Coach K throw a touchdown or score points during their Hall of Fame careers. How have you seen that idea of leaders setting the table play out in your leadership journey?
It's interesting, isn't it, about that, about how you look at any sort of championship team and you think about, okay, who won the game? And the truth is, everybody won the game. And one thing that bothers me a little about sports journalism is the way we build up the individual player. Even though it's a team, it's the individual player wins it. And that's not real life. And that's not how it really happens. And at the end of the day, you have a coach who spent a whole year or many years developing the team, developing the players, work with the general manager, figure out who should we hire, who should we bring in, who do we have to let go, which is obviously a very hard thing to do too. You put that all together, then you have the season. I mean, you got playoffs, you go through the whole thing. And at the end of the day, somebody wins. Everybody was part of it, but the coach never got on the field. She or he never actually touched the ball or whatever it was. And it's interesting about that. And I think that's part of what being business is a little bit, is that you're not actually, like in our business very technologically oriented. I haven't coded for a living. I haven't paid to code anything since the 80s. But I got to help set up the vision, the strategy. And I got to make sure we're hiring the right people who can do that coding, for example. And of course, it's a very large organization, 25,000 employees. So I have a whole team of people. And it's just scaling up a football team, right? You have your head coach, then you got all your individual coaches for all the different areas. So again, you're just scaling it up bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually you end up with a multinational like us, but the principles are the same.
How do you make sure that they know that while you might get the credit, right? You're the one on CNBC, you're the one on you're the one that is often noted for the success of the company, and we'll talk about some of that, but that you recognize that it doesn't happen with them. How do you specifically turn that table? There we go. Throw a little open table in there.
A little open table action there.
There you go. How do you turn that table so that the team realizes how you see this environment?
Well, I think one of the most important things is you got to keep on preaching that, and you have to live it. So it's not just the words, the actions.
Right.
And sometimes you'll see people who it's more me than us, and that can come across pretty quickly. And that then ends up with everybody going for themselves instead of for the team. So you got to always be promoting that concept over and over again. And unfortunately, I see many times you'll see, unfortunately, people who don't either say it or believe it, and they really are for themselves. And usually those are teams, companies, whatever, that usually run into trouble.
So you, with 25,000 employees, you've got a lot of young leaders.
Yeah.
This podcast serves a lot of younger leaders, right? A lot of those who are growing in their leadership, and they're looking to people like you for lessons. If they're struggling with a little bit of that, right? This idea that I want to be the one that takes the last shot. I want to be the one that the world, and yet, as you pointed out, I'm the leader. I'm not going to actually take that shot. How do you how do you coach some of those young leaders in your environment to be careful and to use that to get ahead? You have to get along. I love that phrase.
You ever notice one of the things that's really hard for you as you move up the ranks is giving up what your previous job was.
Oh boy, isn't that true?
It's hard because you know how to do the job you had, the one you just left and you moved up higher, but you know how to do the previous one and you want to keep doing it. And now there's somebody else who has that. And generally you'll think like I could do that better too. So you're doing your own job and you got to stop doing the other job that you think you could do better, but that's not what you've been moved up to do. So as a manager, one of the most important things to understand, okay, what's your new role? What is your objective? What are you going to try and get done? And how do you measure your success? And so one of the things is that one of your things as a manager to be successful is the other people achieving their goals. Well, then that will help drive you to do that. It's like, how can I help those people achieve their goals? Because my objective, the way I am measured, is by their success. And that's one of the really important things to recognize.
And I think a real a subset of that answer, I would assume you would agree, is that in order to help them achieve their goals, you have to know what their goals are.
Oh, totally. You always have to be working that always with them because what you don't want is okay. So a lot of companies still have year-end reviews. So you have this
Right.
year review process, right? And then you're explaining to the person how they did. If they don't know how they did already, that's a real problem. And why may they not know how they did? They may not know how they did because they didn't know that your objective for them was different than what they thought the objective was. You really want to set that up at the beginning, how we're going to measure whether we're winning or not. And that's
Right.
why, business and sports, a lot of similarities are sometimes different. In in sports, a lot of times it's pretty easy to tell whether you're winning or not. It's not that hard.
Yeah. Scoreboard shows.
It pretty much shows it right there. And in business, sometimes it doesn't show up quite as easily because sometimes it's take a long time to achieve whether or not we're hitting success or not. Even when you have quarterly objectives set up, there could be a lot of them, and some of them could be conflicting with others. And we're not expecting to hit every single one in the quarter. And so it's more complicated that way. So that's where you
Yeah.
may have to keep on having conversations on how are we doing, what are we doing, and what changes do we need to make. Being very agile can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, should I assume from the way you began that answer that you're not a big fan of year-end reviews?
I think it's important to have more than one review. Okay. And I think that constant feedback done appropriately can be very helpful. There's nothing, it's sort of like, let's see here. What's the biggest role what's the biggest coaching there is? And that, of course, is being a parent.
Right.
Because you are leading your children to be eventually adults, good adults, right? So you're leading the whole way. Well, you're always giving them feedback. Hopefully, you're doing it in a good, positive way.
I know. I
Sometimes
said
we
I like the
fail.
way you said it. Done appropriately, and
Yeah,
that's
sometimes
it.
we fail in that area, right? But you're always doing that. And that, could you imagine if you went to you didn't give a kid any feedback at all once a year, you would end up some very, very, very poorly developed kids. So they would not end up well. So
Yeah.
that's something. So it works all the way. Children, whether teammates and your coach or business in a business environment all the time. Feedback, very helpful.
Delivered appropriately. I love that.
Delivered appropriately, very important.
You know, another one of the articles I read about you had a great. You were talking about success in sports, life, business requires discipline.
Yeah.
Now, I know you. We're going to talk a little bit about your high school athletic career and when you were on tennis and the ski teams. And um, when did you first realize the importance of discipline? Is there a moment that kind of stands out for you?
Well, I think I got it from just watching my father. Just watching my father. My father would get up every day long before I got up. And he would be out the door before I got up. I knew he had gone off to work, and I'm waking up for school, maybe 6:45, and he's out the door.
Mm.
And he's come back late because he's working long hours. He comes back real late. But I recognized that was what I did every single day. And that a long story. When I was 14, I was a messenger in the city, New York City, carrying boxes and stuff all over the city and subways and buses and stuff. But to do it, because we lived in the suburbs, I would go in with my father. So I'd wake up when he'd wake up. And we'd
Wow.
go in really early. The reason he go in so early is he wanted to go to a gym and run in the morning. And he'd run in the morning. I don't know what time. It was like 6:30. So we're getting in there we're waking up real early. I'm 14 years old. No,
Oh my gosh.
every 14-year-old boy does not want to wake up.
I have one. I
Long
can
before the
promise
sun
you.
comes up. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that was again an instance where learning discipline, understanding that that's how one should be. And then later on, I had other lessons in life of how important discipline really is. But I believe by far, and something my wife and I've talked about for a while, my kids are now grown. My son's going to graduate from university this month. My oldest has graduated a couple years ago. But for them, I've been trying forever. And then my wife makes fun of me, saying, Glenn, that's all you do is talk about discipline, how important self-discipline is. Yeah, because it's really important.
And so you saw it in your father. Did it show up in? I think one of the reasons that so many organizations that we talk to love to hire athletes or people that have an athletic background is because it's innate. In order to be on just about any team or to compete at anything that's successful, you have to show up. You have to be prepared. You have to. I mean, there's disciplines that are required. Just practices at a certain time. You're not allowed to be 10 minutes late. I mean, all those things. Was there a moment in the athletic side? I love the story about your dad, but was there a moment in your athletic side where you really decided now's the time? I got to add a little more discipline to what I'm doing in order for you to fully achieve whatever it is you were attempting to achieve.
Well, no, we're gonna put it right on the record right now. I'm a lousy athlete. Okay. So we know that I'm gonna make up the statistics because everybody makes them up. I'll generalize.
But if
More
you
than
say them
half
with if you say them with authority,
authority,
it
then yeah, right. Exactly. It's like 80% of men believe they're in the top 75%, percentage of good athleticism. It's just like the fact is you can't have more than half, can't be better than half. But the fact is, I know I'm a lousy athlete. Okay. That's the first thing there, right along. So, I was an okay tennis player in high school, never went beyond that. Uh, I was okay, person on the ski team, okay. I'm a good I can ski okay. I'm not a bad skier. I'm a pretty good skier. But the fact is, in terms of racing in high school, yeah, nothing special. So, but the fact is, just to improve though, by practice, one can improve oneself. And there's a great thing nowadays about deliberate practice, a lot of science in that nowadays. And that goes back to the Malcolm Gladwell thing about 2,000 hours. Well, it's not really 10,000 hours. It's 10,000 hours of deliberate practice where you're actually getting feedback and you're improving in that specific area. And that's really important. Just spending time doing something that isn't going to improve it, how you're doing, whatever it is. And we see a lot of that nowadays in science being driven. But back before there was all this science, it was just understood that practice makes perfect is something that probably came about, I don't know, maybe the Greek, like a couple thousand years ago, who knows? But it's true. And I know that. And that's where the discipline comes from. It all loops back to something. keep on practicing it until you've got it right.
Research shows that 80% of us believe we have a book within us, but the number of people who follow through and do the work to create that book is far, far less. The reason is that the process can seem so overwhelming. And that is why I have partnered with Forbes Books to make the process easier for those of you who listen to this podcast and believe you have a story in you. So if you're ready to turn your leadership experience into your legacy, start your journey with us today at Forbes Books. Visit forbesbooks.com/Don to get started. Well, I love that because you're right. The number of times you'll have somebody say, well, I did it 10 times, but were you any good at any of the 10 times you did it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you weren't good, you didn't actually, it's not like, I loved your line there that the practice needed to be deliberate with feedback.
Totally. You have to somebody telling you you're not doing it right, or you can improve it at this. I mean, let's say you're playing tennis, right? And you're practicing, say you're sheriff, right? And you have somebody actually watching, seeing what are you not doing perfect? And is the toss perfect? It's really interesting to see how most people can improve whatever you're doing with deliberate practice. Now, goes into the issue though, is it worth the time and effort? Because what are you going to get out of it? You're just playing recreational tennis with friends, during the weekend. You want to do better because you want to win, but you have a lot of responsibilities probably. And how much time do you have to make it just a little bit better? Is that going to make, what's your goal? If your goal is just to have fun with your friends, are you going to get that much more enjoyment, improving that much? Some people would, some people wouldn't. But at least understand why you're doing what you're doing. Very helpful.
I love deliberate. That's so, and again, I think another thing that happens often as we're practicing or doing things is that we're so focused on the outcome, right? Did we make the basket, as opposed to worrying about, was our form right on the way to
Right.
go to make the
Yeah,
basket, right?
absolutely. Well, I know more again with the practice, it comes down to if it went in because of luck, that's not very good.
That's right. You've shared before, and I'm really excited to kind of learn more here, that when you were a teenager, you had a severe stroke.
Yeah.
It left you unable to speak, read, write, um, complete right side paralysis. Yet 9 years later, you graduate from Harvard Law School with honors, right?
Yeah.
Can you maybe share some of the recovery journey and how it shaped your resilience that you would use in the world of business?
Yeah, it's interesting. Is it was there something already there in terms of discipline and practice? Or did it come out of that? How did I get from where I was to where I became? And that is an issue of certainly through hard work. So I had the stroke spring of my junior year in high school. I didn't go to school again until my senior year. So I was several months, not great, the semester ended, and then there was summer and back to school senior year. But I only took 2 classes my senior year. Fortunately, I'd already taken my SAT scores and everything. And I'd taken enough credits. I only needed to take 2 classes. I had that chip I was a smart kid, and then I wasn't. I
Mm,
was a really smart kid, and now I wasn't smart. Now I couldn't even speak. And my goal was to go back and be smart again. I'm going
mm.
to be smart. I'm going to show I can be smart again. I I don't I don't need many hours of psychotherapy to know that one. That one I knew from the beginning. I knew very early what I wanted to do. And I agree with you, that probably drives a lot of people around the world. Now, the question is, does it drive something good or bad? That's an interesting thing too. And at the end of the day, when you reach whatever that goal was it worth
What was the hardest part of that journey back?
it? I think it's a feeling of self worth or not. And where do you drive your self worth from? So if you're a great athlete, let's say, and then all of a sudden you are injured, and then you're no longer a great athlete. How do you feel about yourself now? Because you're no longer that star athlete.
I love that line. Where do you drive your self-worth from? But you also had the great line earlier in the answer. You were saying, "I was a smart kid then, and then I wasn't, and I wanted to show that I could be smart again."
Right.
Was that kind of a reflection of a little bit of your self-worth was that you were a smart kid and you wanted to get back to that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And it's how I measured myself. What did I consider who I was? And also, what did I think? Because it was also important because I figured being smart would help me get a good jobs and and be able to make money so I could live the life I wanted to live and all that stuff that's important too. My parents didn't go to college and have college degrees. So right before I had my stroke, I had scored extremely well on the SATs. I did great. I was going to go to a top college. My parents never been to school. It was all going to be great. Yeah, who knows? So there was that element too of expectations.
Wow, wow. I love your journey, at Booking Holdings. You started there in 2000, right? Worked your way up, right? 17 years, you became CEO, and now the company's winning awards, right? Best company for employee happiness, best company in work-life balance. Um, so I wanna ask a little bit about how you create culture. How culture's, I think, a buzzword that I believe gets overused and often inappropriately so. But you had to hone in on culture in order for those kinds of awards to be acknowledging the company. What are some of the steps that you took to make employee well-being more than a buzzword in the company?
So part of this cultural, we call it cultural change actually. The leadership team, which is me and some of the senior people in the company, we got together and the head of our people department, HR, Paolo Pisano, and he said we should think about what culture do we want to have.
Mm,
There's a saying, different types of cultures. What do we want our company to have? Because really, and we had a number of things we discussed and such. And at the end of the day, we, as a leadership team, chose after debating such that we really wanted to be a customer centric company. That's really what we really want to be. And then from that, and Paolo really leads a lot of this as he's the leader of, but it's everybody has to part of it. Everybody has to be part of it. So it's not me driving culture. It's all of us together driving culture and understanding what we want. And what does it mean to be customer centric? What is that? How are we going to measure it? So we actually have metrics that we use to try to see, are we being customer centric or not? Or are we comfortable with what the numbers are right now, or how can we improve it? And we continue to evolve it. It's evolving all the time. But it's something that I think that it's not, again, it's not top down, you will be X. This has to be something that involves everybody. Everybody has to be party to.
absolutely. You've led some of the most strategic acquisitions in travel, KAYAK, OpenTable, rentalcars.com. What advice would you give to leaders navigating acquisitions today, especially when it comes to integrating new teams? And how important
Yeah.
is it not just to bring the revenue in, but to make sure that they're culturally a fit in what you're adding?
Yeah, no, that's the hardest thing because at the end of the day, one of the reasons most deals fail, most of the data shows that most acquisitions fail. That's the data. And when I say fail, they fail from the perspective of the buyer. The deal for the
Right.
buyer did not work out what they thought it was going to do. But many times the seller was great. They got a
Yeah.
premium.
The seller's gone.
Yeah, hey, they're okay. But and so the issue is one of the biggest reasons that happens is a cultural mistake. It didn't work well. And whether they didn't prepare for it or they didn't recognize it wasn't going to work because of such complete different cultures, that's something you really have to think about beforehand. End of the day, though, I don't know. I really don't know what the secret would be or not. I do know though that setting up incentives early at the beginning of the deal so people know what they are going to be measured, what they're going to be measured, how they'll be rewarded, really important right from there. Um, who's going to have ownership of different areas right at the beginning, so there's not confusion about that. That's very important. Do you believe what's being told to you or not?
Mm.
Because no audit in the world is going to be able to tell you whether that's true or not. So you're going to, let's say you're buying a small company, okay? And one of the reasons you're buying it is because the senior managers have done a great job building the company to where it is the time you're going to do the acquisition.
Mhm.
Now, you know that that's the critical values, the people there. And you're setting up what the incentive plan is. And you're saying, all right, and so you will stay on for 3 years for this plan to continue to grow it so that we get it. And the person saying, absolutely, I'm 100% in. Now, is that true or not?
I love it. I want to ask you, a lot of leaders today are facing challenges with turnover, right? People switching jobs more freely than ever, it feels.
Yeah.
What have you found to be most effective in keeping your team engaged and reducing that churn? Are there intentional things that you do to build to try to keep that engagement that allows them to be best and for the longest amount of time?
So, again, let's go to sports. And yeah, it's very interesting nowadays. Once free agency first came into professional sports and how that changed, how many players, would go, I'm going to go for the money, go leave the team I'm with and get more money, somewhere else as a free agent. Now, of course, now we have college with the
Oh my
portal.
God.
Oh, now we have that, whereas, I no longer feel that I'm part of this team. But here's the thing, in business, everybody's always a free agent
Mhm.
throughout the world. There is nothing that really locks you in anywhere. Now, there's some places you have a non-compete, some jurisdictions, in some parts of the world, you have that. Good luck enforcing a lot of those. And really, Jason, is going to be enforcing it against you going and working for a competitor who's close to you.
Right,
You're not going to stop the person who's going to go over to a team in a different industry, company.
right.
That's not going to be able to do that. So why does the person stay with you versus going to it somewhere else?
Right.
And sometimes it's money, but that's not a really good reason. Now, you always have to pay competitively. That's understood. But then why do they say if you're going to offer a similar type of compensation? It's got to be a mission. It's got to be a reason, something that they get satisfaction out of. And it's an element of who you work with. It's an element of what are you trying to accomplish? It's an element of, am I helping contribute to goodness around the world, perhaps?
Mhm.
All of those things, so many things in there. Is there career advancement potential? Like getting good training? There's so many things there. So you got to do all these things. And this is a final problem around the world. It's not just customer service. So while we do not actually do any actual ground transportation in terms of driving cars or such, we certainly have. We provide people with rental cars or ground transport, taxi. The interest is going to happen. What's going to happen in ground transportation? So I don't know. Have you had the benefit of using, let's say, Waymo? Have you had a Waymo
I
self-driving car yet?
I did it in
It's,
Phoenix. Yeah. Yeah.
what'd you think?
Scary for me. I just I mean, again, I kept thinking, I was like watching everything, thinking, boy, I hope that car stops, or I hope we stop. I mean,
But it's okay. At the end, you got out. You're still in one piece.
I'm still in one piece.
Right. So
But it's interesting. I don't have those same concerns, or if there was a driver who I have no clue who they are, right, or
right.
how good the driver
Interesting.
they are.
Right.
If they're sitting in the front, I'm okay.
Is that weird? But
Yeah.
you and I, we're about the same age, so we're old. Okay, let's state it clearly. You and I are old. Young people have no problem with this. And by the way, the next generation, they only here's the issue. In the U.S., 3 million people make their living driving a commercial truck.
Right.
Right? Many million more drive things like an Uber or a Lyft or a yellow taxi or whatever. Okay, you enjoy that Waymo trip. Yeah. But it's a lot cheaper for Uber to have a Waymo than it will have a human. Okay. Oh,
Right.
this is going to change relatively quickly. What are we going to do as a society for millions of people who used to make an okay living and now they don't?
So
And
as a
yeah, well,
so as
that
a business leader, how do you manage those two concerns? One,
yeah,
trying to provide the greatest customer service, and maybe it is automated,
yeah,
maybe it is generative, but at the same time, you have 25,000 people that wake up
right,
every day
right,
saying, "I'm going to work for you."
right. So here's the way I think of this. Okay, so we have a problem here, a potential problem that's coming down the road. I can see this coming as easily and as predictable as the tides. Okay, there's going to be a high tide. There's going to be a low tide. I know, and I know. The only difference is I know what time it's going to be high tide. I know what time it's going to be low tide. I don't know exactly which year, which months these significant changes in our workforce are going to happen, but I know it is coming very fast. Now,
Mhm.
I, in charge of my company, I cannot change this societal change. Now, I could not embrace this change, and that would be fatal to the organization. And that would mean everybody will eventually be out of the job if I don't embrace technological change that makes the company better, makes the service better for people.
Right.
And if we don't decide, well, that's a decision. Not
Right.
deciding not to do anything is
Is a
a
decision.
decision. It's a
Yeah.
decision. And I have a I can guess how the results are gonna be.
Yeah. You know, I wanna end by talking to you about the importance of mentors. For those other of us who are constantly seeking mentors, are there things you're doing today to actually still look for mentors and lean into other people for guidance?
Now, one of the things I do like to do a lot is I like to read biographies because I'm trying to learn how did they deal with that situation or not? What did they do or not?
Right.
Um, and in fact, this is one of the things when you get older, you start forgetting names and such, but I'm sure you'll remember it right away. Former coach, Villanova. Um,
George Raveling?
yes, thank
Okay.
you.
There
Perfect.
you go.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
knew you would come up with it.
There
I
you go.
knew you. Well, he had a book recently out. Um, and I'm not sure if Ryan Holiday wrote it with. I think Ryan Holiday wrote it with him. It's phenomenal about his life, and it's incredible. And I'm underlining. So, in terms of, you don't have to have a human mentor. You can learn just by reading what others have written and said.
Amen. Love it very much. Glenn, this time has gone far faster than I thought it would, but I should have known that I'd learned so much from you. I have pages and pages of notes all
Oh
over
my
here,
God.
written on everything I had on my desk in front of me. But thank you today for being a corporate competitor with us.
Well,
Honored.
thank you. No, it was a great conversation. I thank you.
What an inspirational character. I'm fired up for all that I learned, but I want to offer up three takeaways that stood up with me. The first was his discussion, his very candid discussion about how he navigated the months after that stroke. That, I mean, imagine a junior in high school, right, experiencing that. That's got to be so powerful. But his line, right, I was a smart kid, and then I wasn't, and I wanted to be smart again. He's navigating where his identity came from in this tragedy, and he wanted to prove that he was smart again. Now, obviously, graduating from Harvard Law School with honors 9 years later made it clear for all the rest of us that he succeeded. But that concept that he was self-aware of what mattered to him, and that became a driver for him, is was incredibly powerful. And I'm so proud to have kind of heard the way he expressed it, and that will remind me that I have to be equally aware. But then I also loved the discussion about him navigating the cultural change within the company when he um, uh, finally ascended to leadership there. He asked with his team around him, "What culture do we want to have? What are the words we want people to say about us when they talk about us as a company, both internally and externally?" And they picked those 2 words, right? Customer centric. But then I noticed that he had won the organization had won so many awards all about employee engagement and employee responsiveness. And so I was intrigued by that, but he made a great point, right? You can't be customer centric. You can't have good customer service if you don't have happy employees. So you have to start there. And what a powerful customer centric was the end goal that he wanted to have the company recognized for. But to get there, they have to start by working things internally. And then the last piece, boy, I loved his discussion around not just practice, but deliberate practice, right? Uh, Practice where while you're getting better or you're working to get better, you're getting feedback. Someone is actually pouring into you. So you don't practice the wrong thing 10 times in a row and think, I've just practiced. The idea that the practice needs to be deliberate, that feedback has to be involved, was extraordinarily important. You have to always set and explain goals to the team in that deliberate practice so that they understand what it is that they're moving toward, what's happening in the future. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you'll do me a favor and subscribe to our Corporate Competitor Podcast YouTube channel where you can watch these great interviews as well. Once again, it was a great day in the world of corporate competitor, and I appreciate you.